to begin, can you share your name and a bit about your journey to becoming a monastic?
Sure. So I'm Brother Phap Luu, and I am a monk for about 21 years now, actually. 21 in 2003. And so, yeah, there's many ways to tell a story, right? Basically, I experienced suffering very deeply in my early 20s, lack of direction, and yet a deep desire to help transform myself and the world from the path I see us going down. But I didn't know how to do it. And then when I discovered mindful breathing when I was about 23, 24, it was like this moment, and that's it. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people to get in touch with the impermanent nature of their body and realize the preciousness of the present moment and learn how to cultivate good qualities in themselves and help others to do that. And so that's what I want to do with my life. So I want to be a monk. So right away when I started meditating, I had been in a kind of depression for a couple months after living in Europe for a few years after university and working and getting involved in activism. And I came back to the States and was staying at my mom's and just I also come off of a multi-year relationship, and so there are many things, and I didn't want to get a kind of job and a house and a car and a family and a kid, like the whole catastrophe, right? I was very aware of the climate crisis, and so I was trying to see how can I live my life simply on the earth and also contribute something toward a positive change. And it seemed like that was all embodied in the path of a monk. So I had some school loans to pay back, about I think $13,000, which nowadays doesn't seem like very much. But I said, okay, I'll just practice the Dharma every day, and somehow whatever comes my way, I'll just be open to it. So I worked all kinds of different jobs over a couple of years and practiced meditation and studied Buddhism as much as I could. And then sent my last check to the bank, and I met Thai the next year, our teacher. So actually I discovered meditation through the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, that a booklet I picked up in a Chinese temple near where I grew up. And that became, I still have that book. I think it's up in my room, but I just memorized that text and I practice it every day. And I saw my body changing in real time. I realized, wow. And all the ways in which my mind was stuck in a rut of anger or frustration, it released that tension, and I felt free and joyful again. And I thought, I can generate joy with this practice. So I felt like this is the manual for life that I missed when I was born. But it wasn't until the next year that I met this community. So I went back to where I'd gone to college up in New Hampshire, and I was working in a bookstore, and actually I was practicing living like a forest monk. I had actually moved out and I was living in the forest above the town of Hanover, New Hampshire. And first in the AT shelter, the Appalachian Trail shelter, and then I just found a rock and I put a tarp over it and I was sleeping out there. And then one day the bookshop I was working in, the monks, Plum Village monks came in and they told me about a day of mindfulness, and I felt like they'd walked right out of the sutra book. These monks just walked right up, and they said, "Come, come practice with us. And so I rode my bike out to the center, which was nearby, and it was called Maple Forest Monastery. And then I met the monastic community, and I felt, wow, I've never seen people like this before. They're so mindful, so aware. And I heard the first Dharma talk from Tai. And I was very curious because actually it was a talk for monastics. And Tai was talking about what we call the caretaking council, which is how we make decisions, or the kind of executive body that implements the decisions we make in the community. And I thought, wow, this is a Buddhist monk talking about community life. So I lived in these kind of anarchist squatter communities in Europe, and one organic farming community in Spain, and so I'd experienced the difficulties of community life, the difficulties of communicating and making decisions, and so I was very curious about. I'd learned about Buddhism, but I didn't know there was a Buddhist monk who cared about community life and how to live in communities. I thought, this is very interesting. I'm very curious about this monk. And so I read one of his books called The 8 Realizations of Great Beings. And one of the first lines in there, it says, political regimes are subject to fall. And I thought, this is my teacher. I saw not just that book, but everything. I saw the way the community lived. I thought, I remember writing in my journal and saying, this is not with a view for what will happen next year or the next 5 years. This is looking the next 100 years. This the way this community is being built. And so I wanted to be part of that.
Can you share in your understanding what the essence, is kind of a direct question, but what the essence of Buddhism is, what it's really about?
So it's transforming suffering. Yeah. It's a path to transform suffering. And when you transform suffering, that is happiness. So, happiness and suffering are not separate. It's more clear in Sanskrit, sukha, dukkha. They are connected. So when you feel dukkha, suffering, or ill-being, so that's why if you say ill-being and well-being, it's a bit easier in English, because it's that kind of thing. They are connected. So transforming suffering, that is happiness. And so the path is, and the path is in every moment. So it's not like your happiness is over there, and you just need to undergo this trial in order to get to your happiness. But it's in every moment. You experience happiness. That's how you know you're on the path. So Buddhism is not about attainment, but it's about real-time transformation of ill-being or suffering, and how to do that, and learning skillful ways to do that, and helping other people to do it. Yeah.
Can you share a little more of what ill-being is, or what suffering is in the Buddhist understanding of it? And,
sure, yeah.
Also, I noticed a lot of interpretations of Buddhism share that it's to become free of suffering, like get rid of it, be free of it, put an end to it. And I know that Tai is very well known for saying it's about transforming it, as you say. And so I'm curious on the distinction of that and the importance of that distinction too.
Well, you have to be careful. Freedom can be just an idea. And so what is true freedom? So that's something that we need to ask. I mean, I ask myself, what is true freedom? Because what I think might be freedom, like the freedom to choose this or that, or buy this item online, or go on this vacation, or have this career. You think that's freedom, but I would say that's a kind of illusory freedom, the freedom of the so-called freedom of choice. So I think here freedom is a kind of lightness of being. Tai would say dwelling happily in the present moment. And so it's not about choosing this or that, but it's about understanding what is pain, hurt, trauma, whatever we call it, what is somehow not easeful, light in our body and our mind, understanding that arises due to conditions and causes, that there are, and you can recognize those conditions and causes, and you can find ways to remove those causes and conditions, and then you suffer less. And when you suffer less, that's freedom. So when we talk about freedom, it's not about freedom of choice, but freedom from our habitual patterns of causing, this unpleasant pain, trauma for ourselves and for other people. So that is what we call true freedom. And the freedom of choice is just, is illusory, because you when you choose one thing over the other, you actually get caught by that thing. To you, it seems like you get something, but that thing starts to own you when you choose it. So we're very careful what we do, and with what we do and what we don't do when we're on the path, because we know, like, if I buy something or somebody gives me something, I often feel it's a burden. I have to take care of that thing. It seems like I own it, but actually it owns me. You have a laptop, you have to think about the laptop. You have to take care of it like a pet. Make sure it's in good condition, all these things. Like, wow. Before that, I was free from having to take care of a laptop. Now I have to take care of this laptop. And you have, of course, a utilitarian view towards it, because you say, okay, with this laptop, I can accomplish this and this and this. But when you look deeply, like, who is owning who? So freedom also means establishing sovereignty in our own body and mind. And learning, which means that there's no owner and nothing being owned. So it's free from these dualistic concepts of owner and slave, black, white, up, down, wealthy, poor, all these things. We don't continue to look at the world in that way. And that's why the freedom of choice is a false freedom. And true freedom is in looking deeply into what is going on in the present moment, and being able to stop feeding or nourishing our pain, our trauma, our suffering in the present moment. That's real freedom. And that's not a dualistic freedom. That's not like, instead of this, I get that. But it's rather, it's transformation at the base, transformation of, at the base of, meaning really within our own body and mind complex, we understand the process of coming to be, of things, of emotions, of perceptions, and learn how to stop feeding or giving rise to the kind of thinking that brings about hatred, ill will, anger, delusion, because all those things are drawing us on like a carrot in front of the donkey, either driving us away from somebody or pulling us towards something else. And that is seemed like it will be our happiness, but it's not. And it's not for monks to tell us that, or a teacher, but for us to see for ourselves. Sometimes you think, once you can accomplish that thing, you get that title, that position, you get that job, that'll be the end. You'll be happy. But you get it, and then you realize, I'm still not happy. I want to get something else. That's because you've made it a habit of wanting to attain things or get things. So we have to be careful and not treat freedom or nirvana or any of these things as a goal we want to attain, but rather see how to realize it right here.
Beautiful. Yeah. How can people realize it right here? Like, what is it that people can do to transform their ill-being and actually realize well-being?
So we say there are many ways into the practice. Sometimes in the tradition we say there are 84,000 Dharma doors. And the beauty is you can enter that door that works for you in the moment. And we don't have to feel like there's only one way into the practice or one way into the Dharma. Many people find mindful breathing very helpful. I've personally found it very helpful. And because the breath is always there wherever you go. And whatever activity you're engaged in, even when you're sleeping, you can practice being mindful of your breathing. So it's portable. It doesn't require equipment. You don't need to have an expert doctor or even an expert meditator. You can just read a few words about how to practice mindful breathing, and you already have quite a bit of you already have a practice that can bring you joy and happiness in the present moment. Just stopping what you're doing, bringing all your attention to your breathing. And I feel so grateful to be in a community which emphasizes mindful breathing, because any moment I have the right to come back to my breathing. Nobody will tell me that, but Phap Luu, why are you doing this or that? I think I joke with the brothers and sisters. I think I would have been fired many times for different kinds of jobs the Sangha has asked me to do or be involved in, or kicked off the board or whatever it is. But luckily, because I'm a monk, I just practice letting go and coming back to my breathing, even if people are frustrated and upset around me, because I just love to be present in my body and be aware of my breath. And the main practice that I always say that I love to do is to shine that same awareness that we can put on our breath on my suffering or my experience of pain, and in the body and in the mind, because there's so much to learn there when you stop and are aware of your suffering. Like any even the slightest tension in your belly and your shoulders, see, you shine the light of mindfulness on it, and then you see it right away. It changes. You start to relax. You're actually using your body's natural capacity to heal by giving your attention to that part of your body or part of your thinking in your mind. So if you notice you're harboring some resentment, some grudge against somebody, or they did this or that, you just keep shining the light on that. So it's in your mind and your thinking, and see, why do I have those perceptions coming up so often? What if I turned it around and I praised that person for all the good qualities they have? Why do I keep saying, oh, they do this or they do that, or they think badly about me for this or that? You just turn it around. So you learn how to transform your thinking, how to transform your way of relating to your body. And some people have a fear of their own body. And so just thinking about their body creates tension and stress. So we learn how to, with the mindful breathing, we learn how to shine the light of mindfulness in a way that's very relaxed and not non-aggressive, non-violent. Because if you're holding your breath, you feel painful feelings in your body. Even the Buddha practiced before he discovered the Eightfold Path. He tried all kinds of practices, including eating very little and holding his breath for long times, and he had so much pain in his body, and then he saw that was just creating more stress, and so he let go of those practices, and then he learned mindful breathing. And the Buddha taught mindful breathing on a full moon night, and he told 1 month after the end of the rains retreat, he told the monks, I will stay here for another month after the 3-month retreat when Buddhist monastics don't travel. And I would say that's kind of like now in the age of social media influencers and everything, is kind of like putting a post that because at that time you say, oh, I'll stay here for a month. Most people forget that it was not easy to find the Buddha. Like, you had to figure out where he was if you wanted to study with him, and then walk for many days and to be close to him. And so by saying that, the Buddha was saying, okay, I'm going to be here. And so many monks traveled from very far away because they had a feeling the Buddha was going to give some important teaching. And then he taught mindfulness of breathing. And I think that was already from that time, the Buddha saw it as a very public teaching that could be safely practiced by many people. Now, I know that now there's some people who have trauma in their body, who have a lot of fear around their own breath and being aware of their breath. So, but of the Buddhist teachings, I feel it's one of the very safe practices that even someone who hasn't had a chance to come to a practice center or study directly with someone more experienced can take on and start practicing in their daily life. So I think mindful breathing is a very beautiful Dhamma door, but it's one of many Dhamma doors. There's awareness of your step, contact your foot makes with the earth. A beautiful one is awareness of our feelings. So I often encourage people after a couple days on retreat to just take 24 hours, and instead of living in their thinking, just bring all their attention to their feelings in every moment of the day. Whether it's pleasant, unpleasant feelings in the body, pleasant feelings in the mind, or neutral feelings. And just be aware of it. Don't think about why it's there. Don't add a story to the emotion. Just raw awareness of the feeling and living in that. And that's very interesting practice. I've done it many, many times. I do it quite often, actually. And it becomes a habit, being aware of our feelings. And so then your body is naturally, in real time, relaxing when there's tension. You're recognizing points of unpleasantness, unpleasant feelings in the body, and then you right away bring awareness to it, and then it transforms. So that's the nature of mindfulness. It's when you shine the light of mindfulness on something, it changes. It's actually more when you don't give attention to that thing that it stays very rigid and fixed. Actually, it's still changing, but it's like there's some tension. We grasp at things, we can't actually get anything. It's very interesting. We're funny. Our mind is very funny because we feel like we get something, but actually it's all an illusion. Our feelings, our emotions, even this body, you can grab on into it all you want, but you still are impermanent and you're going to pass away. So I say it's like you're grasping at sand that's falling, but it just goes through your fingers because you can't. So, but the problem is this energy of grasping within us. And it's just like we have this skeletal hand inside of us, which is just like in this tight iron grip, trying to hold on to life, hold on to what is most dear, hold on to our idea of ourself. And we don't want to let go. And yet what we think of as the self is always changing. So you can't hold on to it. But the holding on stays. The habit of holding on, of this tight grasping within ourselves. So with more awareness, for example, of the feelings, you learn to, and I do it often without knowing it now because I've been practicing for so many years. It's just the light of mindfulness goes to that area where there's tension or pain, and it just relaxes, becomes more free. And I still have areas of tension and stress in my body and mind. So there are things that have been transmitted to us from our ancestors, and we are recipients of that stress, that trauma. And we often don't even know where it comes from anymore, but it's still there, manifesting as painful feelings and emotions in our body. And so, I think that's one contribution of Buddhist teachings to the science of healing, is recognizing the intergenerational aspect. That it's not just something that it happened to me in this lifetime, but it's actually the lifetime of my ancestors, not only my blood ancestors, but also my community, the ancestors of the community in which I grew up, and I received the teachings. So I receive as well the good points as the suffering and the trauma. And that gives me a lot of energy to practice, because I see that I'm not practicing only for myself alone, but for all of my ancestors and my community. So when I embrace that suffering, I have a lot more energy to do it, because I see that I'm not doing it for myself alone. Even I might sit in the mountain by myself for many days, but I contain multitudes, right? My ancestors and the land ancestors and the conflicts, the wars. It's a lot to hold. So if we just see ourselves as an individual who is doing that, then our capacity to do it is quite limited. But if we let go of that notion of being an individual, then suddenly we have an enormous amount of energy. So you kind of unleash the power of the ancestors. And then you have a lot of capacity to hold. And we know the earth has a lot of capacity. So the earth we are also the children of the earth. So if we learn that we can actually draw upon the energy, the power, the force of Mother Earth, that Mother Earth is within every cell of our body, then we can have even more. It's not only our ancestors, but Mother Earth is also our ancestor, and is us. It is us right now. We are. Mother Earth is speaking and Mother Earth is listening, right? When you're able to go beyond your kind of narrow, likes and dislikes and ideas about yourself and perceptions, and you open yourself to a kind of vast reservoir of energy. And many brothers and sisters say, "Brother Phap Luu, why do you have so much energy?" And it's like, it's so easy. It's not me. You just let go of, you remove those obstacles, and then it's there. You have what you need. And Tai often said that, our teacher, I remember learning from him, and he would say, Tai, the ancestors have already prepared everything. Tai just has to play the role, of the Zen master, the monk, and I learned from that teaching. I try to practice like that. Just don't take it on yourself. Let the ancestors do the work. They already have a lot more wisdom. And our ancestors are in every cell of our body. So they're right there, but you override them with your thinking. You see, so by meditating, we see that, that we contain the multitudes of ancestors. So that includes the trauma, but it thankfully includes an incredible capacity to heal and transform. And my experience is that that capacity is much greater than the suffering. And if you don't experience it like that, it's just a matter of removing more obstacles, I feel. And And nobody can say, I speak for Mother Earth. That would be arrogance to say that. But you don't speak for Mother Earth, but Mother Earth is present in every cell of your body, right? So it's not about getting power, like the one who knows and the one who doesn't, right? It's you don't create those two categories. The knowing it's just the knowing is that is going on, and that is prajna, or insight. And I don't know where it comes from. Thích often said, he used the example of a flame, and you light one flame, and then you put out the lighter or the match, and you say, well, is the flame of the match the same as the flame in the candle? Are they different? You cannot say they're the same, but you also cannot say they're completely different. And when you blow out the flame, where did it go? Did it go to the north, to the south, the east, the west, up or down? No. When conditions are no longer sufficient, the flame ceases to manifest. And everything is like that. So even our bodies, we think we came from our mother and our father and so forth, but it's actually just conditions coming together. And when they're sufficient, then life manifests. And when they're no longer sufficient, life ceases to manifest. And that's just very normal. That's the way things are. There's nothing kind of magical about it, but it's just that we think things are differently. We superimpose on reality our ideas about life and birth and death and all these things. And so then that's why we suffer so much when somebody dies. Because we think that, we don't see that every moment. They're just a wondrous manifestation of causes and conditions. And that part of being a wondrous manifestation of causes and conditions is that you're always changing. You're always being nourished by causes and conditions for me to speak, for me to be sitting here. It's just a wondrous manifestation. And you cannot rewind and go back and say, okay, let's go back to things were, because already who I was at the beginning of this conversation is already gone. And who's here right now, you cannot even know, you cannot even identify. So how much less so who I was 5 minutes ago, right? So that is, and that's the nature of everything. It's all like that. It's always changing. And it's much easier to see when you have the chance to live simply, to live this life where we let go of our preferences and our desire to have a family, and because it's a lot of responsibility to have a partner and raise children, and how you say is that the Buddha was kind of dismantling the complexity of life. Because you look at our cousins, the chimpanzees, and the chimps train themselves to be more violent and aggressive and powerful in order to be the alpha male, so to gain access to the females, and they are the only ones who can mate with the females in the open, and then the beta males, they have to go hide behind a tree. And not the female, they also want to be with the beta males, but they have to go hide from the alpha males. And so then the humans, we started building houses to hide our sexual escapades. And so that's why the Buddha said, life inside is crowded and dusty. What if I went forth into the forest? And you notice it when you're out in nature, then I notice in myself that desire for sexual gratification, it becomes less. And as monks, we cannot be alone in a hidden spot with a member of the opposite sex. And the same would be true if you're attracted to someone of the same sex. We should not be in an enclosed space. And so that the Buddha, I think, intuited all these things. That's why there was the instruction to for monks to go out and live simply in the forests. Because that sexual desire and the need to gratify it is also the source of a massive amount of suffering. And so it's not about repressing sexual desire, but it's about understanding it and learning the ways in which sexual desire has been nourished by the media we consume, the advertisements and the songs we listen to in the grocery store. I don't listen, to many songs at other places, except when for some reason I have to go into town, and now I know the grocery stores that don't play music when you go inside, because it gets stuck in your head. And it's mostly romantic songs. They make you feel like really groovy, and then you want to put that can of beans in your trolley, or your shopping cart, or whatever it is, your potato chips and all that stuff, and then you go home and you're eating the potato chips with the love song in your head, thinking things are wonderful. And this is the origin of craving and the habits that drive us to do the things that make ourselves suffer and others suffer. So I think the Buddha had a deep wisdom, and he didn't do it alone either. There are others in his time who were leaving society, who were finding ways to live a spiritual life. So he had models that he followed, but he followed those models, and then he went beyond, because he really, in my opinion, created the basis for a psychology, a spiritual psychology, an understanding of the mind. Most practice at that time was based in the physical realm of like how to train the body to overcome, to attain liberation, moksha. And the Buddha saw that the root of the suffering was in our mind. And that was a great innovation that the Buddha brought. And so then he kind of broke open everything. And that allowed people who didn't have the wherewithal to leave their home to be able to practice as well, and to learn how to change their habits, their daily ways of living, so that their desires are not so overwhelming, so they can be happy and peaceful with a simple life, even they have a family and a job and all those things. So Anathapindika and another lay, there's a potter the Buddha loved to stay with. I secretly think in some ways he preferred to stay with that potter than some of the monks, so that he had a lot of problems with the monks. So there's one potter, and that potter, he only took the castings off of the ants when they would dig out the clay. He didn't even want to disturb the ground. In order to get the clay he needed to make his pots. So he's very gentle and very kind to living beings that might be in the land. And the Buddha loved to, when he was in that region, he loved to stay with that potter in his barn. And so, thankfully, so the Buddha actually gave a way that not only the monks, but also the people living in the city and urban areas could practice mindfulness, because he saw that the root is in the mind. So if you learn to practice in a way that you understand the root causes and conditions of your tendency to hate, to feel anger, and to get caught in disinformation. That's what we call it nowadays. It used to be called delusion, but now we call it disinformation. He already said this, that those are the root poisons that are causing our suffering. So when you get down, but it's not enough just to learn that. You have to shine the light of mindfulness on the pain, on the trauma that you experience. And then the more you look at it, the more you see how those kind of root emotions are often behind. Like we say hatred, but it's also fear. Because hatred is a kind of fear, or you could say fear is a kind of hatred. Right? Is it you're repulsed by that thing? You feel like it threatens your life. That's why you experience fear. So there's a repulsion. So that is what I practice every day, every moment. I try to recognize when those emotions are coming up, and then manifesting in my thinking, and then that thinking is feeding my emotions. And so there are things that are very strong that come up in a moment, but there are things that are happening at a low level in every moment of our life. All of our thoughts have a tone. They're feeding something. So don't think that your thoughts are just neutral, or whatever you give your attention to is not good or bad, or having some kind of effect. But actually everything does. Everyone's trying to influence you. I mean, now people care less about money, and they just want your attention. Just a few seconds of your attention, and then that has value. The more eyeballs, on that part of a website, it's like, and you get, you sell your product or whatever, and so you should be careful whatever anybody is saying and doing, and see, like, is this really worth my time? Is this valuable? And then the way to know is this helping me to suffer less? So when we're reading the news, we might thinking, well, I need to be informed. But is that information leading to more suffering in you? Then do you turn around and say something strong to your child or your husband because you've read an article which waters the seed of despair in your consciousness? There is no shortage of stories and words out there that will feed your despair. And those stories, and no shortage of stories which are very true, which will feed your despair. But that same was true at the time of the Buddha. There are horrible things going on, and horrible things that continue to go on after the Buddha's life. It's not like he is some kind of he just pacified all the nations, and everyone was just happy and content with what they were doing. No, quite the contrary. We know very vividly about kings that went on marauding neighboring countries and without any right to do so, and people who treated each other poorly, murdered, and so forth. And that happened during the Buddha's time, and it happened after the Buddha's time. So just like now, we have a lot of suffering in our world. But how do you live your life? Are you able to generate joy? If there's nobody with joy and happiness, who will we take refuge in? So make yourself a refuge for yourself and for others. I mean, the Buddha said that directly in his last words. He said, make yourself a lamp, or actually it's kind of ambiguous. It could be an island as well, depending on how you translate the word Deepa. But the Buddha, one interpretation he said, be a lamp unto yourself. So if you don't find somebody in the world who's a light for you, be your own light. We need to be lights for others, and shine your light brightly. And so we start with mindful breathing, and then that's mindfulness we cultivate with being aware of the breath and learning to develop concentration on the breathing. We can then, when we train that capacity for mindfulness, become stronger, that we're able to shine that light on our difficult emotions like anger and hatred and fear. And we start to treat them as a friend, start to understand them and not have so much fear of our own emotions. It was a big insight for me when I realized that I was spending a good part of my adult life just avoiding difficult emotions, avoiding situations in which I thought difficult emotions would arise. And so if we're not careful, our whole life might be just kind of snaking our way through the world in order to avoid the difficulties. And then we don't learn anything. All we learn is how to avoid. It's kind of avoidance tactic. And then, but eventually suffering catches up. The body's impermanent, and we cannot avoid suffering. So I think the better way is to come to understand our suffering. And when we do that, we suffer less. So Tai said it's an art of suffering. And we train ourselves in the art of suffering. If we know how to suffer, we suffer less. So I would say look into your own life and see in what ways you're avoiding suffering. So that is a space for changing, making a change. Shining the light of mindfulness on that suffering instead of running away from it. Looking into it and understanding how it arises. That's so wonderful. So much understanding and wisdom comes from that kind of practice.
You answered some of the questions even that I was planning to ask, which is amazing. But one of them was around this. I think a lot of people have fear, as you said, when it comes to their emotions and their suffering, and it's a very counterintuitive insight that the Buddha had, in that turning towards our suffering is actually how we start to suffer less.
Yeah, right.
And I'm curious for people how they can begin to understand that, and what they can do. I mean, I think you've already spoken to it a bit and given good examples, but that's the thing that's coming up for me, is I can imagine with people hearing about their suffering and their difficult emotions, like most people just want to run away. What would get them to want to look at them or understand that there's value in that, and then how they can actually start to do that, like turning the compost kind of, or transformation, the actual transformation.
Yeah, I think you need a community to be able to transform your suffering deeply. A community of practice, a community of like-minded individuals who are practicing to let go of their idea of being an individual, going as a river. And so that's what we create in Deer Park and Plum Village and in our centers around the world, like living, breathing communities, which are training people, training ourselves to embrace suffering and look into it. Because if we do it alone, we tend to do it like a horse with blinders. So we're able to look at that suffering, which is not so difficult, but the really deep kind of suffering, which is can be for many people very dark and very scary. We can't look at those things. Very few of us are able to do that on our own. So that's why we come together and do it together. Because then when it becomes overwhelming and we feel lost and scared, and the kind of abyss opens up underneath us and we feel like there's no ground anymore, then you have your brothers and sisters, your siblings in the practice who are there by your side to support you. So that's why we put so much emphasis on building the community of practice. And Tai got a lot of that from his connection to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his vision for a beloved community. And Tai made that vow to himself when he heard that King was assassinated in 1968, that he would continue to build the beloved community. And for me, what makes the community beloved is its quality of presence. And particularly, I don't see a way to have true presence without being aware of our suffering. That doesn't even make any sense. It's nonsensical. In order to have true presence, you need to be present for everything, your suffering and your happiness. So doing it as a community, you get to borrow the energy of the community. You don't do it alone. Every morning I wake up and I go to sitting meditation with my monastic siblings and many of the lay friends who live here. And it's wonderful. Everybody shows up 5:45 in the morning and they sit there for 45 minutes in silence. That's amazing. What's going on during that time? Well, there's a lot of things that could be going through people's minds, but eventually you start to learn to point your vision inside. Our teacher would say the way out is in. You point your light of mindfulness within yourself, because you're sitting there and everyone else is sitting there, and it's kind of awkward to get up in the middle of the sitting meditation and go out the door. So you start to look inside and see what's there. And at the beginning, it might be very scary, even for many years. But slowly, you start to befriend your emotions. And so when jealousy or anger or hatred come up, you don't feel so much revulsion or the tendency to deny what's going on. But you're able to accept it and say that that's my jealousy, that's my anger, that's my sadness, and that's okay. But I don't want to be driven by my sadness and my anger. I don't want to continue to let them steer my life. Rather, I want to let happiness and joy and peace be the one driving, and know that, like happiness, you can sit in the passenger seat. Yeah. I think that it's a tragedy of our times that so many of us are driven by our fear. And that for me is not a real life. It's not the life worth living. So we need to be able to understand our fear. And that means coming to terms with death. And when we see that actually our idea of who we are in existence is false and mistaken, then we don't fear death so much anymore. Because death is going on right now. Cells are dying in your body's changing. This conversation can't ever happen in the way it's already happened again. It's already passed. So you feel more at ease with this letting go and non-grasping energy. And then when death comes, you're fine. It's just normal. Just like birth. It's a continuation of wondrous manifestation. And you manifest and you demanifest. That's it. Yeah. And actually you don't really die, right? Because that's why we say manifestation instead of creation. Tai often taught us that. When you say creation, it implies that somebody, something has created us. But actually, it's just like the flame. When conditions are sufficient, the flame manifests. If there's not sufficient oxygen, or a wick in good condition, the candle cannot burn. So the same is true of our body and mind. And it's of the nature to change and to grow. We see the trees, we see everything has that nature. Even the rocks erode and change their shape and split. So that's quite normal. What's abnormal is our idea that things don't change, that we want to live forever, that this narrative that runs through our head is who we are and so forth. That's weird. But we grasp onto that weirdness because it somehow gives us some satisfaction, some way of avoiding our pain and our suffering. And but eventually it's not very helpful. It's a distraction. So just to come back to your question, I think the most helpful thing is a community, because a community is real, lived. You share food and living space and values, and I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to online communities. I mean, I know people get benefits from connecting online, but human, lived in-person communities have thousands of years of robustness in them. And these new, like creating communities. I mean, we've also had books that create communities of people having come common thinking and so forth, and that's led to revolutions and in our understanding. And the internet and online, communities are also providing that. But we have to be careful, because you can just curate your virtual world. Those people you want in your world, you can have them, and the rest of you can just cut them out. And I'll leave as a homework exercise for you to look at the world now and see where that's gotten us in the past 20 years. I don't need to explain. So if we need to be brave, we need to have courage to be able to live in real communities with real people and look each other in the eye. And and also that means some things we won't like about the other people we live with. But if we come together with a path like this, and Buddhist communities, it's one of the oldest institutions on the planet, 2,600 years, continuous, not decentralized, distributed, practice communities. It's quite robust. It's been like, knocked out in this country or that country, but it just pops up somewhere else. And so I have a lot of trust in the kind of architectural design capacity of the Buddha when it comes to communities. I think he looked into human nature, and he got the insight not only within himself but from his community and lived experiences in the community and his feedback that he gave. And so the protocols we have for living in community are extraordinarily robust. For me, they're pretty much, when it comes to institutions, I put my faith in the Buddhist Sangha. I put my trust there, because for what we know of the history of the Buddhist Sangha in different countries, separated by centuries and geography, and it's incredible how robust these communities are. People living simple, happy lives, and sometimes making mistakes, but overall relatively nonviolent. Relatively free from dogma and ideologies. And that for me is the proof in the pudding.